American English is hard. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first let me get some possible misconceptions out of the way. When I say it's hard, I'm not making a value judgment. There isn't anything wrong with American English. It's not harder than other accents for speakers to understand or for kids to acquire. And this isn't a matter of my being too ignorant or stupid to get my head around it. Sure, I'm not a native speaker of American English, and I may very well be ignorant and stupid, but the difficulties I'm going to discuss here are things that people know about. So if there isn't a defect with American English, or with me, what's the problem? The problem is phonemicization. That's deciding on a set of phonemes, the basic sounds of a language or dialect that words are made up of and that do the job of making words different from each other so that communication can take place. Phonemicization is important for pronunciation transcriptions in dictionaries, which are basically strings of phonemes. And this year we'll finally see a major reboot of the Cube dictionary that I co-edit, which will include American as well as British English. So this is something my collaborators and I are spending a lot of time thinking about, and it's why we have a new pronunciation survey linked in the description below. You see, languages and dialects of languages can actually differ in how easy it is to come up with a clear set of these basic sounds, such that for any word you can say, yes, it's made up of these phonemes in this order. Here's the Wikipedia article on Spanish phonology. Spanish has 5 vowel phonemes, I, U, E, O and A. Nobody I know disagrees with that. But now here's the Wikipedia article on Chinese phonology. Standard Chinese can be analysed as having between 2 and 6 vowel phonemes. Say what? How could you not know whether it's got 2 vowels, 6 vowels or some other number? It's not like Chinese is an obscure little spoken language that nobody's spent any time analysing. And it turns out that general American English is, in various ways, somewhat harder to phonemicize than, say, well, my kind of accent. One sign that phonemicization is rather less clear for general American than for Southern British is the amount of disagreement there is in how dictionaries transcribe it. Now, as I'll discuss shortly, there are various reasons for this transcriptional diversity across dictionaries, including pronunciation differences in different accents. But even when no dialect difference is implied, it's notable how dictionaries seem to differ in the basic choice of phonemes in a word, and even in the number of phonemes in a word. But before I dive into these differences, let me point out how much easier it is to make such comparisons with Opera 1R2, the reimagined version of my favourite browser. Just dragging a tab downwards splits your screen into 2, and you can drop it on either side, giving 2 pages in the same window. Great for working on any 2 documents at the same time. And if you're like me, how often do you have so many tabs open that you lose what you were just looking at? Tab traces are here to help. Your recently visited tabs have these underscores. The darker, the more recently you visited that tab. And look how you can collapse a bunch of tabs to save space and expand them again when you need to. Whenever you open one page from another, they're grouped into these colour-coded tab islands, and you can create your own islands and organise your tabs by context. When it comes to music, the star of the show is the floating music player, which you can move around like this even outside the browser, with 7 streaming services to choose from. There's also Aria, an integrated AI feature. You can access Aria's command line with just a couple of keystrokes, Control or Command/. So I can ask a question literally at any time, or ask Aria to generate an image from scratch, like so. And if you upload an image, see how Aria's image recognition gives you information on it. Your whole experience is customizable with a range of themes, including colours, animated backgrounds, sound effects and more. Opera 1R2 is completely free, so try all these features by downloading it through the link in the description. So what exactly is phonemicization? In fact, what are phonemes? Well, think of the first letter of the alphabet. Have you got it in your mind's eye? What does it look like? This? Or this? Or this? They're all the first letter of the alphabet, what we call A. So, given that they all look different, what makes them the same? What makes them the same is that they have the same function in constituting words and distinguishing one word from another. It doesn't matter which one you put here, the word is still sax and not, say, six. Each letter of the alphabet is, in an important sense, a single thing, but capable of appearing in different forms. Some people use the term grapheme for each letter. The set of letters in our writing system is the alphabet, and the equivalent set of sounds in a language or dialect is its phonemic inventory. Now we know that the English alphabet contains 26 letters, but how many phonemes are there in the English sound system? You're a lot less likely to have been taught that. We just pick up our phonemes in early life, and we don't need to know about them consciously to speak and understand our language. Linguists, however, are very interested in that kind of thing, certainly if they're making a pronunciation dictionary. Now, the Consensus Phonemic Inventory of Received Pronunciation, RP, had 24 consonants and 20 vowels. And in Cube, we use basically the same phonemic inventory for current standard Southern British, 24 consonants and 20 vowels, even if the way we write some of the vowels may be different from the most familiar RP symbols. But whichever of these symbols you choose, it's the same phoneme, the vowel in words like dress and next and web, etc. But even the Consensus Phonemic Inventory of RP and SSB didn't just come from God or the king. It's based on analysis, on phonemicization. So how is this done? Well, that makes a fairly big chunk of a linguistics degree, but here I'll go quickly through three concepts: minimal pairs, complementary distribution, and neutralization. Remember sax and six? This is what we call a minimal pair. It's a pair of distinct words with different meanings, and the difference in writing is minimal, just one letter shape. Changing between these has no effect on the word, so these are not separate letters or graphemes. But changing to this changes the word, so these are one letter and these are another. Of course, sax and six are also a minimal pair in pronunciation, where the phonetic difference is minimal, just the sound a versus the sound I. The fact that this little sound difference changes the word is evidence that the sounds a and I are distinct phonemes. Now, a major kind of evidence against phonemic distinctness is what we call complementary distribution. If we say two things complement each other, it means they make a satisfying whole.
You complete me.
In phonemicization, if two sounds turn up not in the same place, like in a minimal pair, but in complementary places, that's evidence that they may be just one phoneme. Going back to our letters, upper and lower case letters are pretty much in complementary distribution, at least in formal written style. Capitals turn up at the start of sentences and of names, and lowercase letters turn up basically everywhere else. Where you get one, you don't get the other, and vice versa. Between them, the two kinds of distribution add up to the complete set of possible places. They're complementary. And when you think about it, that's consistent with two things counting as the same. Remember how in Superman stories Lois Lane sometimes gets suspicious?
It's me! Come here! You're gonna get it. Oh. And Clark is not around as usual.
The fact that Lois never sees Clark Kent and Superman in the same situation, that they're in complementary distribution, leads her to suspect that they're the same thing. There's also the fact that Clark Kent and Superman look almost identical, a pair of glasses being just about the worst superhero disguise ever. In speech, we would call this phonetic similarity, which can also be used as evidence that two things are one phoneme. But just as we saw with the different forms of the letter A, variants of phonemes can be strikingly different. When I say Great Britain, what sound is on the end of the first word? Great Britain. It sure isn't t, and I don't think you'll find that many natives who actually say Great Britain. I'm saying the word great there with a glottal stop on the end. It's very different from t, but it has to be a form of the same phoneme. Why is that? Well, you can't have a minimal pair. Great Britain and Great Britain can't mean different things. The distinction isn't linguistically contrastive. And in my speech, there's complementary distribution. I just wouldn't use t in Great Britain, and I certainly can't have glottal t at the start of a word. Right now, I'm not awking you. So what kind of thing makes phonemicization hard? Before I get on to specifically American examples, let's quickly look at something that trips up phonemicization all over the place. This is neutralization, when what seems like a robust contrast suddenly isn't there. One of my videos that quite often blows people's minds is this one about words like speech. What's the sound after the S there? You may think it's a P, but chop off that S and what you're left with sounds not like peach, but beach. This is why when this Italian word is borrowed into Welsh, which is written more phonetically than English, they write it with a B.
Helo, yn y fideo yma, byddwn yn dangos i chi sut i goginio'r spaghetti bolognese.
The fact is, P and B are neutralised after S. You can watch that video for more details, but English couldn't have two words, a minimal pair, like speech and speech. So what phoneme is it after the S? Is it P, like in English writing, or B, like in Welsh writing? Your dictionaries all transcribe it with P, but they were mostly written by old guys who couldn't just hop onto their laptop and establish in less than a minute with a free app that removing the S gives you beach, not peach. The sound in speech is at least as phonetically similar to the sound in beach as Christopher Reeve is to Christopher Reeve. And cube lets you see words with B. So the options are transcribe it with P, phonetically misleading but less scary looking to English speakers, or stick to principles of phonemicization and transcribe it with B, or show that the contrast between P and B is neutralized here and confuse your readers even more by inventing a new symbol to show this, say capital P. And if this third option strikes you as a terrible idea, it's exactly what RP dictionaries decided to do in the 1980s with the final vowel in words like easy. Here the contrast between the vowel phonemes of peak and pick breaks down, and they decided to show this with a new symbol that was neither of those. Many of you will feel that the two vowels of easy are just the same, as shown by the Merriam-Webster and American Heritage dictionaries. But many older RP-speaking phoneticians said easy, and I don't think they wanted to kiss goodbye to their own pronunciation. So let's finally focus on American English.
Fasten your seatbelts.
And first, we have to deal with the issue of accents or dialects. Of course, this could be the topic of dozens of videos, but here I'm going to discuss it quite briefly. My main topic in this video is phonemicizing North American English for a dictionary, which presupposes that North American English is a thing. A term widely used for the kind of North American English represented in dictionaries is General American. I've used it a lot myself in my videos. In fact, I've already used it in this video. Now, many people, especially those who take a serious interest in varieties of American English, will say there's no such thing as General American. This is the kind of idea associated with the great, late and much lamented William Labov, widely considered to have founded sociolinguistics and principal author of the Atlas of North American English. Labov wasn't a dictionary maker, but here's William A. Kretschmar in the introductory pages of the Oxford, now Routledge, Dictionary of Pronunciation for Current English. English in the United States, he does go on to discuss Canada too, has no obvious standard spoken model, that is, no identifiable variety widely spoken by well-educated residents, nothing that parallels RP. Use of the term General American is thus always a mistake. Education is the prime consideration in the formation of American standards, and different spoken standards have historically existed in different regions of the country. Regional varieties of pronunciation show no sign of giving way before the mobility of the population and the omnipresence of national broadcast media. Now, if the term General American seriously offends lots and lots of people, I'll try to find something else, but its validity is a matter of what you take it to mean. It's true that if you define its phonetics as narrowly as RP was defined, you end up trying to home in on 2 blocks of Omaha or somewhere, a group of speakers that's too narrow to be called general. But if, as I do, you take General American to mean a family of substantially similar accents, none of which is clearly more prestigious than the others, then it's not unreasonable to consider this family to represent a majority of North American English speakers. Things are very different in the UK, and it's always struck me as highly ironic or paradoxical that in the world of dictionaries, American English is seen as the diverse one, while British English is so easy to pin down, considering the immense diversity of accents crammed into these little islands. Of course, it's the old hierarchical British social structure that gave the microlect RP a monopoly on prestige and on real estate in dictionaries. Not surprisingly, many Americans kick against the idea of one narrowly defined top accent. So my main focus here is on some of the phonemicization issues that apply across the range of accents that come under the general American umbrella. Take the great American tradition of flapping, also called tapping. Flapping isn't restricted to North America, but it's strongly associated with that part of the world. It's the thing that makes words like city so different from the way I say them, city. We call the sound in the middle of city a flap or tap of the tongue. And note that flapping also makes words like this different in America from the way I say them. I say ready with a D, but North Americans generally say ready with a flap. So there's a flap in ladder and there's a flap in ladder. For me, latter and ladder are glaringly a minimal pair, 2 words differentiated by t and d. But if the consonants in the middle are both a flap, that's neutralization. Like P and B are neutralized for all of us in speech, or E and I on the end of easy. Remember that there are 3 possible ways that phonemicizers can respond to neutralization. You can say it's one sound or the other, or invent a neither one nor the other symbol, like they did with easy. And we can find in dictionaries all 3 options for American flapping. Most dictionaries don't show it at all. They transcribe latter with a T and ladder with a D, implying that Americans pronounce the sounds like me. On the other hand, the Routledge Dictionary shows that there's a neutralization transcribing both with a D. But note that that option doesn't actually tell you it's a flap rather than a real D. And some British dictionaries do the easy thing and introduce a new symbol, a voiced T, which isn't the IPA symbol for a flap or a tap, and note that they don't use it for the flap in D words like ladder, so ladder and ladder are still shown as different. But there's an extra problem with American flapping, because it's a somewhat open question whether neutralization happens at all. Words like latter and ladder can easily be taken for each other, and Americans will sometimes say that they pronounce a T as a D.
Better. What's happening here with these 2 T's? They're changing to a D sound in American English. Often when there's a T surrounded by vowels, those T's will change to D's. Let's practice that one more time. Better. Better.
But some North Americans distinguish pairs like writer and rider with a vowel phenomenon called Canadian raising. I made a little video on that. And there's research to show that there can be a measurable difference between words with flapped T's and D's, even when listeners can't hear it. And of course, Americans sometimes undo the flapping of T, or at least try to, for example when pronouncing foreign words, or recording dictionary audio clips. Often they end up with a voiceless flap, like you often hear from Australians.
Ladder, ladder.
Letter, letter.
The online Oxford Learners Dictionary is quite unusual in actually having a regular flap.
Ladder, ladder.
And they don't transcribe flapping at all. And then we come to vowels. Now, there are vowel differences between American accents that don't really present problems for phonemicization. Take the Cot-caught distinction, or lack of it, for the many millions in the US and Canada who pronounce words like these the same. Some folks say that General American definitely has the contrast, but I'd rather say that some types of General American have the contrast and others don't. Now there's a difference here in phonemic inventory. Those who pronounce cot and caught differently have a vowel phoneme that those who don't lack. The only challenge for a dictionary is whether to use one system or the other, or both. The online Oxford Dictionary shows the contrast. The online Cambridge Dictionary doesn't. The Merriam-Webster and Britannica dictionaries come, I think, from the same source, but Merriam-Webster shows the contrast and Britannica doesn't. For the coming reboot of our dictionary, which is customizable in various ways, we can handle this easily by choosing one of the systems as the default and letting you choose the other system if you prefer. And we can easily let you choose different symbols for the different merged cot-caught vowels in Canada and the US. Likewise, we can easily let you choose merged or unmerged pin and pen. Pronouncing words like those the same is quite widespread in America. It's not just a markedly southern feature, but it's rarely shown at all in traditional dictionaries. More of a challenge to phonemicization is a vowel distinction or lack of it that I made an entire video about. This is the issue of whether a word like above has the same vowel phoneme in both syllables or two different vowel phonemes, what's sometimes been called the STRUT-commA distinction. Plenty of dictionaries show these with different symbols in American English, but both Merriam-Webster and the Routledge Dictionary use only the schwa symbol. And many Americans find the idea of a distinction between them highly confusing, despite often having been told that Moses brought down an 11th commandment, thou shalt not put schwa in a stressed syllable.
On to the difference between as in strut and as in comma. Now, in a lot of American accents, these sounds are pretty much the same. I'm from the American Midwest, and they're exactly the same in my accent. The big difference, and this is how I learned it, was that as in strut goes in the stressed syllable, and as in comma goes in the unstressed syllable.
So how do we decide if it's one phoneme or two? It's no good saying I can hear a difference. Anyone can hear a difference between t and glottal stop, but that doesn't make them two separate phonemes of English. Finding minimal pairs is hampered by the fact that there's generally some kind of stress difference in where they turn up, which would mean they're in complementary distribution. How sure are you North Americans that there's a difference between the second vowels of cherub and hubbub? And if you feel sure, is it because there's a stress difference? Now, when I posted that video, quite a lot of the comments weren't about the STRUT-commA distinction at all. The point they were making was that many of the schwas that dictionaries all agree on in weak syllables aren't schwa at all, but the vowel of kit. All the dictionaries tell you that Inca and Lincoln both contain schwa. That's not to deny that they may sound different, but the traditional story has been one of complementary distribution, the schwa phoneme sounding a bit different depending on whether we have a following consonant, like the final N in Lincoln. But in my experience, many Americans are sure that Inca and Lincoln contain different phonemes. Not Lincoln, but Lincoln. My kind of accent has a contrast between Lennon with a schwa and Lenin with kit. That's a minimal pair for me, so the unstressed vowels are clearly different phonemes. Easy. But Americans tend to pronounce those two guys the same. The question is, which vowel phoneme do they both have? Are they both Lennon or both Lenin? Or are we in neither one nor the other territory again? And so to the big one. Everything so far has been a walk in the Lincoln Park compared with American vowels before historic R.
Anything with an R in it is, you've got to pay attention.
This may seem a bit strange if you're used to thinking that it's people like me who have baffling R behaviour, with no R's in order, but an R in law and order. But phonemically, that's all straightforward. Historic R-dropping created a few new vowel phonemes, and we can insert our regular R phoneme into a few easily defined locations that I've described in several videos. The phonemes are no trouble. But in America, R may not have been dropped, but it's long exerted a powerful influence on preceding vowels, and these R-influenced vowels, though they may be quite easy to pronounce, can be hard to identify phonemically with other non-R-influenced vowels, and hard to disentangle from the historic following R consonant, which may have stopped being a consonant and itself become a kind of vowel. Take the well-known case of Merry, Marry, Mary, which as you hear are all different for me, a minimal triplet. But for very many Americans, that R has had the effect of obliterating the contrast, so there's neutralization. That's a question of dialect. For those that pronounce these the same, dictionaries pretty much agree that they contain the dress vowel, but the American heritage has 4 different vowels in Merry, Marry, Mary and Mare. How many North Americans does that represent? There are multiple American vowel mergers before historic R, but less agreement on what the preceding vowel is. Take words like near and spirit. Is that the same vowel before the R? If indeed the R is the same thing in both words. Most, but not all dictionaries say that both words contain the kit vowel. Wiktionary has kit, but also points out that Canada has what is presumably the fleece vowel, near. Is that right? And if so, is it restricted to Canada? If there are differences, are they related to region, or maybe age? Or is the vowel neither kit nor fleece, but something else? It's a similar story with story. Does it contain the vowel of stalk, or the vowel of stone, or something else? And does the choice between those simply line up with whether or not you pronounce stalk like stock? Likewise, do words like tour contain the vowel of foot or the vowel of goose or something else? And then there are words like this one. Physically, it's not that hard to say it like an American. Murmur. That's fairly accurate, isn't it? But how do you phonemicize it? There are 2 main questions. Firstly, do the first and second syllables contain the same phonemes or different phonemes? Secondly, whether they're the same or different, how many phonemes are there in each one? Following the 2 M's, do we have a vowel phoneme, then R, like in the spelling? In which case, what is that vowel phoneme? Or what are those vowel phonemes? Or has the R merged with the vowel and spawned a new phoneme? Here are 5 IPA options from 5 dictionaries. You might say those are superficial differences, like how you write the dress vowel, and that they all mean the same phoneme, or phonemes, whatever they may be. But look at this list of pronunciation symbols for the American Heritage Dictionary, with its own respelling system and equivalents in the IPA. Presumably this represents one linguistic system, but it gives 4 or 5 representations in IPA for The end of butter is this, which I guess is a single phoneme. The end of peer is this, which presumably is meant to be something different, whether it's one phoneme or 2. Words like fur are given 2 IPA options. I'm not sure if those are meant to be equivalent. And then there's simple rotated R, which is on both ends of roar. I've occasionally had Americans tell me that the thing between B and D in bird is just their regular R, as in right and wrong. Now, is a learner of English contemplating this list meant to be mastering different sounds on the end of roar, butter, peer, fur, and fur?
It sounds just the way it's spelled. HF, UHR, UHURR.
As I said before, none of this means that American English sounds confusing. The apparent phonemic variability doesn't affect how natives understand each other because, for one thing, when we perceive speech, our minds certainly are not breaking it up into a neat string of phonemes like you see in a dictionary. The problem is built into phonemicization. It isn't simply the discovery of reality. It's the imposition of an alphabetic ideal on speech, which is often not alphabetic. Earlier I went through classic kinds of evidence that linguists use when they try to phonemicize a linguistic system, like minimal pairs, complementary distribution, phonetic similarity. Now, there are other kinds of evidence that linguists may consider to one degree or another. For example, something I've just touched on here and there, namely native speaker intuitions. Now, we don't expect untrained native speakers to completely phonemicize themselves, though it can be interesting when they try, as I did when I was a youngster. Natives are notoriously influenced by spelling, which they're far more conscious of than their pronunciation. Viewers sometimes say my videos have blown their minds precisely because they had no idea that their pronunciations were so different from what the writing had always told them. On the other hand, the survey of native speakers that I reported on in my previous video shows just how many of them consider words like train and drum to begin with ch and j, which seems all the more compelling to me because it's not what the writing tells them. Nobody ever taught them that it should be ch and j. I think native speaker intuitions are a very interesting kind of evidence to take into account when trying to phonemicize, albeit with care. And that's why, with our dictionary reboot in the pipeline, my collaborators and I have compiled a new survey on North American English pronunciation. It's linked in the description below, and I'd be incredibly grateful to any of my North American viewers who can take the time to go through it, which should be no more than about 20 minutes. And please do share the link around. In advance, thank you so much.